Talk to me about your party this morning personally holding the Prime Minister responsible for what you've described as a £1.05 billion Tory mortgage penalty. Surely that had something to do with Liz Truss.
Well, it did have something to do with Liz Truss, but as the question people have to ask themselves is, who's better off after 13 years of Conservative government? And it's certainly not people who have mortgages, because what we can look at today is the impact of that kamikaze budget. There are 1 million people who've had to remortgage since that budget. There's another 1 million households who are on variable rate mortgages, and we can calculate the additional cost. On average, people are paying £3,000 a year more in interest.
Not just in the UK, it's a problem all over the world.
But the specific circumstances of that kamikaze budget and the recklessness that they went about that, the lack of probity, transparency, not doing things in the proper way, just not listening to the evidence, they should be held accountable to that. And I know there are people who will say, well, look, that was Liz Truss, that was one part of the Conservative Party. It's not the people in charge now. They've all got to take responsibility for this.
Yeah, but you guys wanted massive wage rises for public sector workers, which would have fuelled further inflation, which would have meant that we would see interest rates go up.
I know that will be the Conservative case. We have been very disciplined in asking for, first of all, negotiations to take place with workforces, recognising the difficulty that they have been under, certainly in many public service areas, for the last 13 years. But let's be clear, this is not the 1970s. Many of these public sector workers were not asking for inflation plus a certain percentage. They were asking for the recognition from government. They'd had a very difficult decade, that they were struggling with the cost of living, and there were major recruitment problems in many parts of the public services. So I do not accept that what we've been putting forward is an inflationary prospectus. You've got to recognise the burden the public sector workers have been under. But fundamentally, the question here is about how not just the Liz Truss government, brief as it was, has led to this. It's the whole 13 years, which have been very low growth, very high taxes as a result for poor public services. And every Conservative MP has been a part of that, and we'll hold them to account for that record.
And how do you feel about sitting around the Cabinet table with Lib Dems?
I think, following the results of last Thursday, we can say with some confidence that we can campaign for a majority Labour government.
Didn't answer the question, though.
Well, because in the key battlegrounds last week, we saw Labour vastly exceed the Conservative Party in terms of the votes we received from the public. And when you then have a national election with London and Scotland and Wales, I think we can have confidence in saying to people, if you want a Labour government, if you want to get rid of this Conservative government, vote Labour for a positive, transformational change. And I don't see any reason...
So you're ruling out power sharing then?
Well, I think we can say to the public, you decide the election, and that's got to be the right way. It's not for politicians to say, we think it's going to be like this.
And if you don't just quite get over the line, would you do a deal with the Lib Dems? The boss says you would.
For Labour, for a Labour government. That's the message we can go out with some confidence and deliver. The results last week, no one in the Labour Party thinks we're the complete picture yet. We know there's more to do. But look at that transformation we've been on since 2019. Look at
an overall majority with that.
The country. Well, I don't agree with that, because I think if you look at the key battlegrounds where there was a Labour and Conservative head-to-head, and local elections will also have independents and Greens and Liberals with a much higher vote share. If you look at those head-to-head places, whether it's the Red Wall, where we lost for the first time last time, or key battlegrounds, swing seats, or places we've never won before, in every single one of those, we beat the Conservative Party.
You've had your 3 Weetabix this morning, haven't you? I better let you go. It's good to see you, as always. Thanks very much indeed.